We'll give it one more minute. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Everybody signed in, but I think everybody signed in. Don't see any new faces today. So on to the RFCs. Frankie, anything on 21 that you'd like us to do?
Not right now. A lot of folks were tagged requesting reviews, so if you want to weigh in asynchronously, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay. Are you getting feedback in a timely manner?
I mean, things are moving pretty slowly, but I kind of take that as a signal that we sort of have other things on our plate right now. I'm happy to let this kind of marinate for a bit as we get more engagement.
Sounds great. And Docker Hub distribution. I think we're okay with this, other than Stephen just needs to do the review. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, and there's no rush here. We can wait for Stephen.
Okay. Is there anything holding us up? Like, once this is approved, like, is there anything obvious that's going to hold us up? Are we worried about pull limits or anything like that?
I think we are still waiting on clarification as to whether or not the Paketo stuff was covered under the existing CFF agreement with Docker Hub. Mm-hmm. So like pending some clarification there about whether or not we need to like resubmit an application for Paketo separately from the CFF. I thought Stephen was going to look into that.
Stephen's the one on that?
He's obviously
on holiday.
He's on vacation for a little bit. So yeah.
Okay. If he doesn't do it, well, he's not going to do well. He's on holiday probably. I may reach out and see if I can get an earlier answer than waiting for him to return. We'll see.
Okay, thank you.
And language level RFCs. This one looks new. Is Arun on the call today?
Yeah, so this is in an effort to like move from Buildpack YAML to environment variables like we've been doing in the .NET and the Go families. Yeah, so nothing much new here. So please take a look and weigh in if you have comments.
And the Node.js maintainers, everybody knows who you are and that you need to review.
Yeah, I took a look at it. But I thought others should probably see it as well. It's Arjun and I are the maintainers, so.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Ruby deprecation dates.
Yes, there's a conversation that started in Slack about filling in Ruby deprecation dates. And from our end, I think it's a little challenging for us because Ruby does not publish deprecation dates when new versions come out. I think the request was to like start adding them as Ruby announces deprecation dates. And so that would definitely pose a bit of a challenge for our current implementation of learning about new dependencies. I was kind of curious what your thoughts on, like, if we determine this would be too difficult to do, what mitigations there would be. Like, is it just us manually fixing it at some point, or I'm not sure. I don't know, I'm more curious if there are any other options other than us trying to constantly check to see if they've added a deprecation date at an arbitrary time.
And I think for us, the biggest issue was we want to provide end users with a reasonably accurate estimate of the end of support date for dependencies that we provide. Currently in the Ruby build pack, we have 3 dependency version lines, 2 of which do not have a deprecation date, and 1 of which has an estimated future deprecation date, which is kind of like the weirdest possible configuration of whether or not something has a deprecation date or not. One of the ones that does not have a deprecation date currently listed actually does have an announced deprecation date from the Ruby core team. So at the very least, I think that one should be like updated to accurately reflect the announced date. For the other 2, I'm not sure I really think that it matters if we have an estimate of what the future is or we have nothing. Mostly from the way that we actually would present this to users is within 30 days of that date, we then start presenting a user with like a log output that says this dependency is about to be removed from the build pack or reach its end of support date. You should, consider upgrading to a newer version so that you're not, your application isn't broken by the fact that this dependency is getting removed. So for those ones, for the 2 that are the version lines that are newer, those are at least a year out further than the one that currently does have a deprecation date. So for us, if it has an estimate or it has nothing, right now is not necessarily all that important because of the fact that neither one of those is going to show any sort of message for at least a year and a half. And so we have a considerable amount of time to figure out what the strategy should be there for those. So I'm really fine with you either estimating what you think the future would be or doing nothing in the 2 cases for the ones that do not have an announced date.
But either way, updating once they do announce to the official date.
Yes,
Gotcha.
so that we can provide an accurate estimate to users as to when something is out of support.
Okay.
How do we
So-
know? Like, what's the official way? Like, I assume there's a post to a mailing list, but is there like another web page with a table on it or something like that that announces this for Ruby?
Yeah, Ryan sent us to rubies.io that has a nice API that will tell you the EOL dates for everything if they exist, and they just show up null until they've announced one.
Yeah, I believe the last time we talked about this and Mark brought it up in the Slack thread was we definitely should not estimate if they do not give an EOL date. And this was something that Stephen also was very opinionated on because it's not our position to give users that contract. If we're just guessing that this is when it's going to EOL and we're not really like in the position to provide users with that guarantee. And I would agree with that position. I don't think we should do that either. So I think in the cases where there's no deprecation date listed, that should just be empty.
Yeah. And I think you should be able to, you should be just polling against this, once a day, once a week, whatever you want to see when these things come in, and then updating the record in the core depths area. And then it'll be up to that should not trigger a rebuild of the binary that's associated with it. And then it's the Buildpacks team's responsibility to idempotently effectively get that same information and write it into their build pack. And maybe they do it once a day, and for a year nothing changes, and then miraculously one day a new entry is written in for them to use.
Yeah, that brings up a good point that I was about to say, that even if we do get this information with the current workflows, I don't think that information will get radiated to the build pack unless we rebuilt. So we'll have to also
Because you notify them when a new change has happened?
In the current implementation, yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, that could be the same kind of thing. Like that could trigger a webhook to those as well anytime the EOL date changes on them.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll definitely look into updating how we do this. But for the immediate term, I can go manually update those EOL dates after this.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
Great. Anything else anybody wants to talk about? No? Okay, let's call it a meeting then. Thank you, everybody.